Okay, just setting up here for Indigenous Matters Live. This is my first time hosting. Just try to set this up. Yes, I don't take up too much of the background here. Okay, let's get this episode of Indigenous Matters on the go. I'm filling in for Treaty 6. She's away tonight. She might be able to join us. That would be really great. 2 people in the room. Whoever else is in here with me. Simone, thank you. Let's start liking the live. Let's try to get up to 1,000 lives before the show starts in 10 minutes. And let's start sharing as well. We have some great conversation tonight. Of course, all things politics. I wonder what we could be focused on. I'm going to just start sharing the live here. There we go. So if you just press on my face anywhere, what it'll do is it'll bring you up a list of your friends, and you can start sending to them one at a time, and they will, in this way, you're not limited to how many people you can share the live with, and sharing is caring, right? All right, let's get this banging out there. Let's get into the algorithm. Got to get the likes on the go. You can just start tapping is clapping. That works. Another person in the room. Only 2 people in the room. Let's get this going. Get it out shared. Tapping is clapping. Hi, Salish. Thanks for dropping by. Great. I was glad I could take in some of your show today. It was good. Thank you for persevering, even if you had to go to your own page to do it. I was, I wasn't getting the emails to get the code, and then they all showed up at one time later, so I'm not quite sure what was happening there. If TikTok sent them out late, or if there was a glitch in Gmail, I'm not sure. All right, sharing the live. Let's get it going out there. Indigenous Matters, 6 p.m. every Monday night. Whoever is our normal sort of guests, appreciate you hanging out and giving me the opportunity to fill in while Treaty 6 is away. Conversation tonight, we're going to focus on outside of the election conversation, and there'll be plenty of election conversation. We're going to focus on my experience in deconstructing colonialism, my continued experience, because it's not a one and done kind of a thing. So I'm open to questions. I'm open to share about my personal experience. I know I'm not speaking as an expert, making blanket statements or anything. I'm just going to talk about what the journey was like for me. Thank you, Salish. Thank you for sharing the live. Let's get it going out there. Let's try to get up to 1,000 likes before we get to 5 o'clock. That's our little goal. Just tapping is clapping. Is it wrong to clap for my own show? CM, welcome. William, welcome. Birch Barbecue, love that name. Thank you for joining. Looks like people are just kind of scrolling through at this point. Gigi joined. Thank you. Thank you for joining. As soon as you join, if you can start liking the lives, we can get it out there into the algorithm. See if we can get some people to join us. Might have Calvin as he's going to join the conversation tonight. Looking forward to that. Eddie G, thanks for joining. Hi, Happy. Good to see you here. Thank you. I'm just trying to get this out into the algorithm of TikTok land. Try to get a few people in here. Hi, Perry. Are you lonely? Did you not get to go as well? I'm excited and nervous to do this at the same time. I'm glad that you could be here. All right. Clapping is tapping. Let's get some movement going here. It's up to 600. Let's try to get to 1,000 before 5 o'clock. We got 7 minutes. Encourage viewers to share your live and invite more friends. Yes, share, share, share. 7 people in the room now. That's better than 1. That's better than 2. Let's get it out there. I know that Treaty has people that like to tune in for all of the wisdom that she has to share. And I'm going to do my damnedest to make sure that I can kind of fill the boots, so to speak. See, Leash Warrior, everybody's still liking the live. Thank you very much. We're at 1,000. Yoo-hoo! Awesome. I'm going to plug my phone in so that it doesn't die halfway through the live here. And then I'm going to set the screen up. Let's get whoever wants to come up and start out with being a guest. Let's see if we can get a couple of guests up here. Maybe once somebody joins us, the grid will change. 17,000 estimated for a PR rally tomorrow. Yeah. Yeah. I wonder if they're going to get the permits down right. I wonder if they're going to find somebody that I can actually count. That might help. Master trader. Yeah, right. Yes, everybody, whoever's in the room, we got 9 people in the room. I'm really appreciating that you're hanging out here. If you'd like to come up and join the conversation tonight, we're going to be talking about, of course, we're a week out from the election, so there's some important conversation around election stuff. But in terms of a conversation for Indigenous Matters, I was offering to talk about my personal experience and how I continually deconstruct colonialism in my life, and understanding that it's not a one and done issue, and how difficult that journey has been along the way. Mega Master. I don't know. I'm not sure. Anybody here know who Mega Master is? I just want to make sure that you're not because I don't know the crowd. Forgive me if you are part of the regular crowd here. But I'm not sure to bring you up just yet. Okay.
Say something to Maggie. We are not looking for handouts. The money that's given to us is owed to us by the federal government, just so you know.
Shmarshy, do you know who Master Trader is? Is Master?
No, I don't. No, I really don't.
And I don't know if friendly or not friendly. If they really think there's going to be 14,000 people at a rally.
Right,
That could be, just living the pipe dream.
right.
Or it could be trying to inform us. I don't know. But because this isn't my normal, I don't know the crowd here as well. And
Um,
whereas Indigenous always vote liberal, they have.
Maggie, if you're not going to be a positive contribution to the conversation, I suggest you just scroll because it's just not the room for you.
Well, not just that, but it's just a blatant insult. And when they have nothing, when they don't have an educated opinion to offer, then they just like to slam, right?
Right,
So
right.
maybe we'll be put on mute here for a little bit.
I
Shmarshy,
think you need to time out.
well, let's put her on mute and let's just see if she can learn. Let's just see. And I would appreciate some mod support tonight. I wasn't thinking about that. My show I don't usually have such a strong need for mod support because I'm a daytime show, right? Seems to be a little more of a gentle crowd. Yeah, that's all they have is insults. You bet, Sean. You bet they are. Canadian Betty, stop. Yeah. Anyways, we were able to get to 2,000 likes in just a few short minutes. I really appreciate everybody's tap-in abilities. Absolutely. And sharing is caring. We're up to 10 people in the room. We'll just keep on working to get out there in the algorithm. I'm going to start the show here officially in 2 minutes. Should have announced that 10 minutes ago. Anyway, we're due to start right at 5 o'clock. So I'm going to wait just 2 more minutes and then we're going to get the ball rolling. We got a 2-hour show to do, and I'm hoping to be filled with all kinds of um, tidbits of knowledge from others. And I'm looking forward to actually kind of talking about, well, all things election, of course, but to talk a little bit about what deconstructing colonialism has looked like. I started my younger years deconstructing religion. I think I have a little bit of experience at it all now. Oh, Sean, thank you for being there to help out. I appreciate that. Indigenous Matters joined the chat. Our friend Sean, Mary Lou, thank you for joining, Mary Lou. Spengali. Looks like a lot of people are starting to flip through, right, as they do
Yep.
their evening TikTok suppers over, that kind of thing. Pasty Nita's here to help mod too. You guys are great. You're the best. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. You too. I didn't recognize your name. You changed it again. Feral Canadian. Took me a bit.
Yeah. Yeah, I got banned on my other one, so I needed this one for backup, and I just wanted to change the name.
Yeah, it's a real thing here on TikTok, you know. I have been shadow banned the Mrs. account. I'm lucky to get 200 or 300 views on mine for over a year now. I used to get like 12,000 all the time. Anyways, I just noticed that it is 5 o'clock, and so it is time to start this episode of Indigenous Matters here on the Beaver Network. I want to first start out by saying that Treaty 6 isn't available. She might be able to join the conversation a little bit later, but I'm going to try to host the show tonight um, and talk about Canadian politics, of course, but also to keep in theme with the Indigenous Matters conversation. I'd like to talk about my personal experience as a white woman and learning about colonialism, deconstructing colonialism, and how that is a constant sort of everyday part of my life. Um, I wanted to remind people that Indigenous Matters is a part of the Beaver Network, and we do have some goals that are trying to be met for gift giving, and this is to help the hosts and the emotional work that goes into creating all of these shows. Down below, you can subscribe for $4.99 a month. That gives you access to our Discord, where you can go in and have deeper conversations. And of course, we're putting all of these shows up on YouTube. So the Beaver Network is very busy beavers as we grow and as we start having expanded conversations through the variety of shows. Today we had Echoes of Duty do a soft launch on their show with Salish Warrior. If you're still in the room, Salish, appreciate you getting on board and getting this conversation about veterans off of the ground. I think that's very needed. Sean, you can let people up, especially if you know who they are. I appreciate that. Calvin is supposed to perhaps stop by for some of this conversation. But
Calvin is wonderful.
yeah, he is. I must say I'm getting to know him. Oh, there's Calvin!
Hello.
Hi, has a rock.
Hi.
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 Thanks for joining.
Yes.
Treaty asked if I could connect with you, that you're, and I've seen you everywhere these days, right? All rhythm, so to speak.
Yeah. Well, we've all been working hard over these last 2 months, trying to prevent what's happening in the U.S. from happening here.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Primary focus. The last year for me, it's
Yes.
a very much the focal of conversation, and being aware really 3 years ago when I call him Tiny Trump, and I'll be referring to him as Tiny Trump. But ever since he got elected, I knew about the IDU 3 years ago. I knew about Mike Romans, who was, connected to Trump, and and how Mike Romans is the treasurer of the IDU, and that Harper and Roman were, partners in arms. And you start looking at all these backroom boys. That's what my dad says. He says, you
I
watch the backroom boys.
I didn't know about the IDU until recently. my recognition of the patterns happened a long time ago because I follow the stock market as a hobby and
Okay.
world news and world events. Um, I began to see patterns, country after country after country after country, and it was the exact same playbook, the exact same patterns. And when it happened in when it was starting to happen in the U.S., I was like, "Oh shit, it's happening here in North America." And that was the first election Donald Trump lost, and all the propaganda started coming out. I was like, "Oh damn, this is just like what happened in South Korea." And then I was like, "Damn, this is exactly what happened in Hungary." And then I started digging in more, and then actually other content creators brought me awareness of the IDU, and I started looking up into the IDU and saw that Stephen Harper was the chairperson, and Stephen Harper was involved with I don't know if it's Israel or Hungary. He's running a major database and surveillance system of the entire population, keeping track of who's doing what, and whether if you're part of the LGBTQ plus community, whether if you're against certain things in the country. And believe it or not, this is exactly what Elon Musk is doing in the United States. He's creating a database where they can surveil all their people. And Stephen Harper is owner of that company. And if Pierre Poilievre comes in, we will all be under that system, which is pretty damn scary.
Yeah, and to go off what Calvin said, when I found out about Stephen Harper and the IDU, and then I started researching the 10 years of the Harper decade, or the Harper decade, which is the 10 years of Harper, and the disparaging things he said about our community, and the things that Poilievre said about wanting uh, and just idolizing Johnny McDonald. And I feel that if we do let this man in to run our country, we will be Johnny McDonald 2.0. And I
Yeah,
don't want that for GB, for Calvin, for all our Indigenous brothers and sisters, our elders and all. I don't want that because this, again, I say this with love. We wouldn't have Canada today if it were for our Indigenous ancestors and people. It wouldn't.
yeah, exactly. When I look at John A. Macdonald, he was the architect of assimilation and genocide of our people through force.
Right.
And Pierre Poilievre, they've over the generations, they've recreated their scheme of genocide and assimilation. Now it's going to be a genocide through policy, and that is even scarier because they've managed to hijack and take advantage of the laws and the system of governance in a democracy and exploited the weaknesses of the democracy.
You know, Kel,
And
back when Johnny McDonald and Marsha were doing this thing, they kind of make it sound like everybody felt the same way about Indigenous people back then, and that was not the truth of it. The majority did not want to have a genocide take place, right? So the concentration of these thoughts, ideas, and the power that where these ideas and where legislation got put in doesn't necessarily reflect that it was. I'm not saying that there wasn't racism. That's not. I'm saying that there was. It almost gets normalized, like every single person was thinking the exact same way, and that this was okay, and that
right.
they hid this in so many ways.
Yeah,
And
you have to understand the human nature of the human species. Everything is designed for us to survive. Not a lot of us have that
luxury.
inherent ability to speak out when it's not to our favor. Um, in 1930, in the late 1930s and the late 1940s, the majority of the population in Germany did not support mass genocide. Yet they were silent because the laws and the governance system and the mainstream made it normalized, that this was normal. And this is the exact same thing you're seeing in social media. The Pierre Poilievre and the conservative demonizing the LGBTQ plus community. They're demonizing women's rights. They're demonizing First Nations, and they're blaming us for stopping pipelines, and it's just because people are scared that the system will
Well,
come for them. They remain silent, and your silence is complicity.
Right.
and if I can say something,
Marcia, if you don't mind, just because Zilvi's been up here, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. I just want to give you an opportunity to say hello. I want to thank you for joining the conversation, and if you wanted to jump in and
Hey, I just didn't want to cut Calvin off because I appreciate Calvin's voice.
oh no,
When it comes to the acknowledgement of what happened historically to Indigenous peoples, that so you have to understand how race works. And race, when we are not categorized as white and we are under a different umbrella, we were not seen as human beings, right? So it wasn't a thing that they saw as genocide. It was quite literally, they saw it as not human, so why should we live? That is what is so horrific about residential schools, because we all know that those were children and babies, but they never saw them as human beings. We are heathens to be wiped off the face of the earth unless we complied with the white way.
right. And I've had conversations with friends who were actually decolonizing themselves and wanting to learn. And they're like, they use my government name. I'm not gonna put that out there. They sit there and they say, Smarsh, you know, colonization was so long ago. I said, no, my dudes. Like, my people, I love you. I love that you're deconstructing right now, but we are still in colonization. It's just modernized now. It
Yeah.
is so modernized. It is so ingrained in these people, like, oh, my ancestors did this. I wasn't responsible. We're not asking you to take responsibility for the actions of your ancestors. We are asking you to acknowledge what you benefit from. And that's the big thing for me.
And
Well, sorry.
a lot of people in Canada, this is exactly what they're doing in the United States. They're whitewashing history. They're deleting all the DEI contributions in the United States. They're whitewashing. They're eliminating. They're erasing all the contributions of African Americans. They're erasing all contributions of First Nations in the United States. Um, they're recreating society. And so when you hear conservatives and this movement and the MAGA Maple movement blaming other groups of trying to rewrite history, remember that their whole playbook is Darvo, on the narcissistic abuse cycle. That's how they're basing their campaign on. So anything that they say is a projection. So we are not trying to erase history, but rather recognize history and accept history. So that's part of the reconciliation process, so we can move together in the future, in hand. Whereas them, meaning the conservatives and the MAGA Maple, they want to erase and rewrite history to eliminate certain parts that doesn't go with their narrative.
Right. And
I
that's the
don't
thing.
I don't feel like it's rewriting history, it's promoting their narrative again, right? Because you have to, so in sociology, we are impacted by media. And this is one of the scariest things I learned in criminology, was the fact that YT people could live their whole life and never encounter a person of color. And the reason why that is so scary is because they go to media. That's why Westerns unanimously portray us as merciless savages, because they need them to be scared of us.
Yes.
So if they're scared of us, they're more likely to weaponize and be
No.
violent with us.
Absolutely.
I agree with
And
that. It's never too late. I really intended to start this whole thing off with a land acknowledgement, and I didn't. So I just want
that's
to say
okay.
I'm coming from the Clately Tenay territory. It is not settled what their treaty number is yet. Very close is my understanding. Um, but those are the people around me, and I feel I want to do that. It's in the back of my conversation listening to you now. So thank you for letting me express that. But small group of people have moved the system in powerful ways. In British Columbia, we have one of the first leveling governing systems where Indigenous consultation has moved beyond just consultation, but giving an equal seat at the table under the NDP Greens. There's a new flow chart out about that. Anyway, there's some steps that have been taken from the groups of Indigenous people here, and I'm with the Clately Tenay territory.
And we appreciate you, Miss the Misses. We do. We appreciate you hosting this. I know it's hard to hear some things, and it's the uncomfortable conversations I believe that we need to have in order to understand the truth, because without truth, we don't have reconciliation, and that's the sad part.
Well, a big piece of this deconstructing the colonialism, as what you were saying, Zilby. I am 61 years old, and I didn't go back to high school till I was 40, and I didn't know about residential schools till I was 40, and I lived in northern British Columbia, okay, where I am surrounded with Indigenous folks and didn't have that very basic pieces of information. I think that I'm pretty reflective of mainstream white Canadians, and not what you say about never being exposed to other people of color. I remember the very first time I met somebody who was Presbyterian instead of Catholic. And it was like a wow, right? And I remember the very first time that um, like we had I'm from New Brunswick, and from the Burnt Church Reserve area with Mi'kmaq people, and I never ever rarely did I ever see somebody of color in my community. Very rarely growing up. It wasn't until I moved out west. When we moved up, my dad took us out west here, and then all of a sudden we're surrounded by a whole bunch of Indigenous people with no way to contextualize the behaviors that were coming. And I was up in Fort Nelson, and the reserve there got a lot of money from a lawyer named Andrew Shook, helped them to sue West Coast Energy, which is now West Coast Energy went to, oh, they're still alive and well. It's a gas company, but they got millions and millions of dollars. And then my friend started dying, one friend became a quadriplegic because all this money was thrown, and there was absolute chaos happening within our little village with people dying, drinking and driving, and yeah, there was some painful things to experience. Now, it was still, it still started, a trend of getting their rights back. But that's my initial exposure to Indigenous people. I was, like I said, 40 years old before I even realized that residential school was an issue. And so
See,
I
I'm
began
sorry.
to tear that apart. Before I started this little rant, what I meant, the shame that comes along with somebody who deconstructs is that you have to have that initial impact of shame, right? Because it's an undercurrent of it, when you're self-analyzing, and it's really a reflection of how powerless you feel within something. And I must say that when I started learning about the residential school system, I felt embarrassed and humiliated, and I wanted to know what my role was. How did I contribute, and then how do I change? So that doesn't continue. As one person, I was in the social work program, and we took First Nation studies. It was my very first time becoming exposed to the issues. And I was in a privileged part of the world where our social work program demands that First Nation studies is part of the programming, right?
Yeah. My
Good
name
stuff.
is Calvin Stevens. I guess in case anybody doesn't know out there, I come from Nova Scotia, traditional Mi'kmaq unceded territory, and I want to speak to how, like, you were just talking about how some reserves are throwing money. See, the Canadian system, how it is structured, each individual band is its own entity, and so how the government has taken advantage of that is that they go to each individual community and get them to sign these agreements. And these agreements usually limit their abilities in their treaties or certain rights or minerals. And so when Pierre Poilievre talks about he wants Indigenous people to be the richest in the world, he's talking about throwing a little bit of cash our way and watching us self-destruct because you're taking advantage of a people that's been historically uh, economically oppressed. And so when we get a lot of these resources, that's we see a lot of that pattern take place. We don't necessarily look ahead in the future for our children, or they might give us these agreements that are temporarily five-year term agreements, but these agreements specifically designed to corrupt the Indian band electorate system within. And so you have authoritarian governments within bands that are feeding off of these large agreements and using those funds to keep themselves within power. They're taking advantage. The federal government is forcing a colonial system upon us, and a lot of our elected leaders are taking advantage and falling victim of the colonial system. And I really don't agree with that. If anything is negotiated, I think it should be negotiated based on a nationhood, all bands put together, stronger as we are united as one. But it's a divide and conquer tactic.
It
That's
is. It is.
something I really don't agree with. And historically, our people don't want to get involved in the federal system. We don't historically vote in the federal elections because we have this. We believe,
Notion.
and I think it's right. We believe it's a colonial system. We shouldn't engage in that colonial system. But as First Nations in this modern age, we have to adapt and we have to change our mindset. We no
Oh,
longer can
absolutely.
we yes exactly we no longer can be idly
Silent.
choosing to exclude ourselves by the colonial system, and with the colonial system dictating to us how we should live our lives and how our governments should be ran. No, we have to evolve our thinking and take advantage of the system, understand it, make it our own, get our own MPs in there, maybe a prime minister someday, and then invade the system like uh defeat the enemy within. You get in there, you establish a government of First Nation people within Parliament. That way, you have a direct control over the lives of First Nation people all across this country for the benefit of First Nation people. But not only First Nation people, in true reconciliation for First Nation people and everybody else in society, because we are all First Nation people.
I agree
Absolutely.
with
I
that
mean, not
sentiment,
First Nation,
GB.
treaty
I
people. I'm
have
sorry.
a question for you. So,
Huh?
back when this was sort of like my initial experiences coming in touch with Indigenous people and all this money being, first of all, the way I phrase that, thrown at them, yes, I do believe that's a destabilizing tactic of our colonial system. But as a part of the community back then, did not understand how that was being, that I was part or how I played a role in that within that community, right?
Right.
You think, because truth and reconciliation is definitely, the conversation today. Where do you see, like, because those steps were important nonetheless, even if it were a manipulated step by the powers that be, that money is Indigenous money and
Right.
rightfully earned Indigenous money, and so where you know it's sort of like an evil first step, but where do you think the shift really started to take to because that would have brought some people that would have
Well,
that money would have been beneficial on so many levels as well, right? It's
and
not all.
and see, like the the way I see it, the truth and reconciliation is absolutely vital to our society. And when First Nations are taken care of and given the land back, we flourish as a country because it's not only benefiting the Indigenous people, it benefits the Canadian citizens as well. All Canadians across the board would benefit if we had land back. And it's not us wanting to come in and take our land. And I think, and this is just my opinion as one Indigenous person, um, I think it's the fact of, they feel that we're going to do what they did to us, and that's not at all what we want. And we just want to be recognized as Canadian citizens. We are the Indigenous people of this land. We do not want to be known as, you know, um, second class citizens or the problem or the issue or, that we want handouts. Because there was a person in here before you two had shown up that was saying, oh, Indigenous people just want handouts. No, we're not looking for handouts. We are owed something by this government. We are owed a lot by this government, and it's not being upheld.
The the reality is, though, the reality is human nature. You're not going to give something up out of the goodness of your heart. So the Canadian government isn't going to give us our land back if we idly stand by and don't get involved in federal elections. The only way we're going to get any recognition and any respect is if we act. There's 1.8 million First Nation people all across Canada here, and that's not even including people that are living off reserve. Okay, so there's a lot more than 1.8 million of us. We have to empower ourselves and be part of the table. And once we're part of the table, then what you're going to have is you're going to have real serious negotiations between the federal government and First Nations on giving us our land back. Because let's take, for example, how the Mi'kmaq were invaded by the British here in Nova Scotia. The British came, they brutalized us, they tried to eliminate us, but they couldn't get us because of our war tactics and our weaponry. We kicked butt. And because the British realized that, they recalled General Cornwallis and they sent somebody over to make peace and friendships with us. Only when a ruling government realizes that it cannot overstep or overtake and take something by force, then there will be willing to negotiate. And that's why it's important to get more of First Nation people in government and each individual reservation involved in electing uh, politicians that are in favor for First Nations.
Okay.
So,
I need to add something to what Calvin has been saying.
okay.
We have had multiple discussions in our Indigenous studies classes talking about if you can fix the system within. The system cannot be fixed within because of the fact the foundation is filled with racism. Like, if you look at Nunavut, for example, Nunavut is primarily Inuit people, and they do their government system different as a whole. Their territory is different than anywhere else in the country, but they still uphold Western ideology of the white man, right? So it's not about numbers, and it's not even about the system, but we are still going to play by their system. That's the thing. So it's not um as easy as us getting into these places. It's
As,
that we need to reclaim in like governance, because that's what it is. It's our governance system. When I say that,
Right.
I need people to hear and understand what that means. It means that Europeans came over and didn't know how to control or govern their people, so they came to us because our ways, in their words, was better at governing the people and actually doing things for people. Like, there's so much, and I feel like this is where um a lot of propaganda has been against us, that we were just these dumb, like, savages who didn't know anything. When realistically, they took so many of our ideas and our technology and used that and then claimed it as their own. But
I
I
just
need to
want
go
to.
back to the missus for a second and what you were saying about the shame that you feel. I think that needs to be rephrased in a different way of you didn't know,
No.
right? But it's also you need to recognize your own story in colonization of white people also went through colonization. You guys were the guinea pigs. You
Yeah.
guys went through it first in order to become white. We
I
were just the last ones on the docket.
I agree, and I find this feelings of shame dependent very much on how active I am in this decolonialization process and how much I keep it right in front of me. Because when I recognized, how do you step away from that? Once you, okay, I've landed all the information now, and my studies brought me all that information. I've landed, well, how do I process that? How do I move that forward? And it was through my work environment and social work and connecting with Indigenous groups that I then became invited in to be an ally. And those were the steps because it helped me to kind of balance the scales a little bit, right? It helped me then to give voice and to hear it coming, the message coming from somebody of this color,
Oh,
right?
absolutely. And
Just
that's the
want
thing.
to just want to remind everybody, tap the screen for some love.
Yeah, tap the screen, tapping is clapping. But the thing is,
We have gifts and subscriptions as well.
there, oh, and it is astronomical that, you don't need to feel the shame of what happened. You need to understand where you stand in this world and where you stand, because once you understand where your privilege is, and this is not me coming at you, missus, this is me acknowledging that you want to be a better person for everybody. You want to recognize where you stand. I don't think it's shame that you should feel. I think it's discomfort if you want to say anything, because with that discomfort, you can move outside the comfort zone that you're in and just, you know, sit with it, recognize it, and understand that you're not to blame for this.
Yeah, I
And
don't carry it at that level anymore. This was when I first started
okay.
into contact with all this information. And I'm a student in school. Sociology was part of my learning as well. But I sat in a classroom with there was somebody from they were Chinese, I believe, and they informed us that residential schools were well honed over and used over in China as well. And I started to see the bigger picture around how the residential school itself is a tool of colonialization, right? And then I studied about how Ireland used the residential school system to control women over in Ireland. They're called the laundry. There's a whole thing on that too. But by the time they got to Canada, the residential school system was well honed, and the Catholic Church being the main delivery of that residential school system. It was already alive and well and thriving. And
Yep.
so,
I I personally believe like we cannot change the system by demanding for the system to change. The reality is we have the Canadian federal government, and that's not going to change. We have to slowly change it from within. And like was it Zuby? Just say we can change it from within, but we can slowly start to sway it towards more equalization for First Nations and non-First Nations to peacefully coexist together. Um, just like when you look at the IDU and how it has hijacked certain political parties in each government, it doesn't do it by first blanketly changing everything. It replaces this politician first, and then it replaces this politician, and then it changes this law, and then this law. Eventually, they set up the structure in small increments where they're able to seize control. And this is the exact same methodology that First Nations have to use in order to have a strong voice and opinion in Canadian Parliament. We have to slowly but methodically begin to get involved and slowly not we we can never change the structure, a colonial structure, but we can slowly sway it towards working for all of us that are all part of Canada, both First Nations and non-First Nations.
I need to say something really quickly. I'm going to introduce myself. So, my name is ZB. I come from the Ochies First Nation in Treaty 6 territory. Um, so that's how you say my name. But
Okay.
yeah,
Maybe.
it's like the word Mississippi. Mississippi is a Cree and Anishinaabe word, depending on the
Oh,
dialect that you say.
I didn't know that. Thank you.
thank you
Um,
for letting us know
but
that.
I needed to go back to something that Smarshy said earlier. When
Okay.
when you get into more radical native spaces, like such as like Arthur Manuel's, like the late Arthur Manuel, is the fact that you come to learn that the Haudenosaunee actually had their own passports,
Oh,
which were
okay.
taken away due to a protest that they had. Um, but I'm like, actually, I want to have Anishinaabe passports because that's what I am. I am of this land and I come from here, right? And
Right.
I don't really want to be listed as Canadian because I am not a squatter. I have been on this land since time immemorial. My bloodline traces all the way back.
Okay. I can get with that.
You know, one of the things I learned about with my social work studies, we do a bit of psychology and the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Maslow is a sort of like an infamous psychologist, I suppose.
Yeah, I
And
know. I am very familiar with his work.
yeah, he stole the ideas from the Black Hawk people that that hierarchy of needs was something that was already in play and in practice, and that was stolen and then taken into our educational systems and sold to others if it was
He
somebody else.
also flipped it upside down, though, right? Because in his model, it's individualistic first rather than community,
Mhm.
right?
Which,
Whereas we are rooted in community when we grow up, as, or at least I was. I can't speak for other people, but my nation, we grew up in community.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, it's based on our survivability. Ancestrally, First Nations had to work together to increase their ability to survive harsh winters and prepare in the summer and springtime for the upcoming winter. Individually, you wouldn't be able to do it alone and survive. So, naturally, First Nations developed that ideology of community.
And I just want to tell ZB, thank you for rephrasing that and letting me understand that you are Indigenous and you're not a squatter.
mhm.
So I appreciate that so much.
Oh, for those that don't know, Canada like is a makeshift word of Kannada, which means squatter. Like
Oh,
that's
I
where
didn't know
that
that.
word like it's a village squatter.
I thought it was Great
oh.
Lakes or something.
No, I thought it was
No,
pure.
Kannada is I'm pretty sure it's a Mohawk word.
No, it's the Haudenosaunee word, and it means little valley or little village.
Yeah, Great Lakes or something like that.
I'm looking it up right now.
Google's going.
It means village or settlement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's not me, man.
I just,
Okay.
in learning at 40 about residential school, it wasn't just learning about residential school, it was just learning about indigenous culture in general, which was never part of my upbringing, right? Like I went to school, I got A pluses all through school. There wasn't this huge, it's just like, written out of history. The victors control the narrative, right? And that narrative is being rewritten. What I have personally seen and changed since the late 80s when I started paying attention to this more. It's pretty incredible. It's pretty incredible. And to see the rise of the matriarchy within the indigenous governance systems too has been something that I wrote a couple of papers on it as a feminist when I was in school. And I think, I don't know if anybody wants to talk about that conversation, but I think that has a great deal to do with the way the shift occurred across Canada.
There's repeat that again. What was the shift?
So the shift really was about how the Indigenous rights movement really started growing strength as matriarchies took over the governance roles within and their governance systems were allowed to play out naturally instead of like the elected the res councils imposed on people through the colonial system as other governance systems. In the matriarchy, is my understanding, is more women chiefs were elected, and that started to shift that. Started it even in the late 70s, but especially in the 80s, that started to make a difference.
Yeah, historically, women are leaders within First Nation communities across Canada. I know for my own area, a lot of the First Nation rights came from court cases hard fought, and when our court cases were recognized, and this was battles that had to be won after the 1982 Constitution
Yeah.
recognized First Nation rights. So we have a large fraction of Canadians now because each human being is selfish and they want more resources for themselves. That's the individualistic mind frame of the rest of Canadian society. That's not First Nation thought. They see First Nation people right now regaining their rights, having their rights recognized, and having more dominion over the land. And that scares the bejesus out of them. So, right now, this is why we see a lot of shift from people that had racism buried deep down inside now start to swell and come back up because they feel that their livelihoods and their way of life is being threatened. And you see this with immigrants too. They blame and they hate on immigrants. It's a very sad state of affairs how fear can be used to manipulate the
Oh,
masses.
Mhm.
and just going on that is like I have a shirt and there's a saying and there's a shirt that I have. It says equality for all is not does not mean less rights for you. It's not pie. It just means everybody equally gets treated the same way. But someone else pointed out to me, you can't have equality without equity first. And that's a big thing that people aren't looking at. When I say equity to people, they're like, you mean houses? No, I don't mean equity in housing. I mean equity as, oh God, I'm drawing a blank what equity means. ZB, you have a computer next to
But
you.
You, equity is a First Nation thought because we all believe in shared resources and
Yeah.
helping each other survive. European thought is more linear, where everything has to happen in a straight line. I have to hoard the resources individually myself. So, how do you change the minds of the mass Canadians out there that still have that linear thought? That is
Right.
a good
Okay,
question.
I have some sociology theory. Okay, so I was listening to this podcast and they were talking about the difference between left and right and the thinking of left and right. Obviously, we know they're two vastly different things, but they were talking about how the right actually has daddy issues and they are wanting to have that authoritative role in their life. That's how they want
Oh,
to be governed.
That's right.
Whereas the left wants to be nurtured because we're looking for that motherly nurturing role in our governance system.
Sounds like a good time. You want to be
Right?
nurtured, but you want a daddy too at the same time.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
When you think of it is it struck a funny chord, eh? But when I think about conservatism in general and um, sort of how conservatism and people who ascribe to that, religion has such a fundamental piece of that, because when you're raised with Christianity, you're raised to worship, and then you're indoctrinated from youth, right? You're to worship one guy, one leader. Your mindset for that is instilled from the time that you are a child, right? And
It's also ingraining the patriarchy in you, right? Because God has been described as a man.
that's right.
And, we only talk about Jesus. So, right, it's upholding the patriarchy. Like, in my humble opinion, and which this is not backed by academia, but this, or at least not academia that I've been in classes for, but this is my theory. So, obviously, religion was a tool to uphold capitalism around the world. And with capitalism comes patriarchy, right?
Mhm.
And that is in great, like, inwoven in society that we have now. And I feel like that's where, as Native people, there, because we were the last ones to go through it, that we are the ones that are at like the resistance of it, because we know that there's something up and there's something wrong with that thinking.
That is a very good point. Thank you. Yeah, you learn something new every day.
I
That
learn
is
so
cool.
much from you guys all the time. I'm learning new things. I'm researching new things. And I'm not able to vote tonight, but I am going on the 28th, and I will not be voting conservative. I will be voting liberal.
You can see this in modern, when I think of it, you can see this in modern times in the United States. They're using religion and patriarchy and dominance of men trying to assert themselves as masters of their domain again. And they're using the white nationalistic Christian movement to further their
Right,
agenda to control the resources of the United States and the world.
right. And
That's
the thing
interesting.
is, they just passed the safe don't save vote or safe vote, I think it was, where
It's
women,
Safe
if
Act, and it's basically removing the ability for women to vote unless they have a passport, which basically means that, and also it will go after your right to vote if your name is different than when you were first born. So
How,
if you
oh,
got married, like you just lost your right to vote because your
yeah,
name is different than your birth name.
that's the
right,
SAVE Act, right? It passed the
Yeah,
House.
that's the Save
yeah,
Act.
they just
And
passed
it's
it
not only
really
that,
for,
it's for the it's against the LGBTQ plus
yep,
community because people, when they transfer, they have their birth certificate is different from their new name now, and people in the military too. Part of the SAVE Act is they won't accept ballots after a certain date, and people in the military all over the world. The federal military mail-in system is notoriously slow, so ballots usually arrive after the election. Those won't be
hey
counted
Calvin.
also. Huh.
Oh no, ZB already answered it. Yeah, it goes after adoptees as well.
In my opinion, I
Yeah,
haven't read anything, but like if it's going after, if your name is different than your birth name, that automatically would go after adoptees.
It still needs to go through the Senate. We'll hope that it gets stopped at the Senate level, but it's definitely passed Congress, and that
it,
you know that's a
I read somewhere, and I could be wrong. Don't quote me on this, but I read somewhere, and I'll have to find the article I read. But it sounds like it's been passed through Senate. It's just waiting for an executive order right now.
exactly,
But
or signature.
yeah,
Oh,
signature. Sorry, it's just
not
waiting for a
Yeah,
signature right now.
no. We
that
need
is
to.
crazy.
But again, I could be wrong. I could be wrong. I'm not always wrong, but when I do read things, my words get jumbled. So
I
So that
wouldn't.
means as Native people, we just lost our right to vote because
yeah,
we
pretty
wouldn't have
much.
passports because we're poor.
Mhm.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah,
A lot of groups
not
and
First Nations in the United States. Yes.
yes, this is an American thing. This doesn't apply to Canada yet, although it's coming.
Yet.
I must say I was really insulted by Tiny Trump's latest phrasing of Indigenous people as victims.
Right. And
Suddenly,
not to mention, I'm also very disturbed by him saying the first thing I'll do is sell off federal land. You cannot sell off federal land, my dude. It doesn't belong to the federal government.
Yeah. Oh, there is, yeah, the 180, and that people would believe him. So who would be listening to Tiny Trump's message about Indigenous people being victims? Who would welcome that message in this moment, right?
What's that?
What group of people is he speaking to when he's trying to refer to Indigenous people as victims? Who is that going to win over in terms of a vote?
The racist conservatives, I'm assuming. I don't know.
Is that just for the base? Is just this base building?
Can you repeat the? I'm trying to. I have dyslexia, so sometimes I have to process something over when somebody repeats it. Can you say it again?
Well, Tiny Trump has now referred to Indigenous people as victims when it comes to him coming down with his crime uh, platform, and that he needs to protect Indigenous people because they've become victims. And we've
That screams that we're going to be wards of the state again.
it
Yes.
not does it not like have the ilk of that all over it, right? That the patriarchy is stepping in, and that we have to take care of you, and that we need to make the decisions for you, and we need to protect you, and framing framing it that way was just so it just so
Yeah. Yeah.
insulting. And I thought,
That
who's going to believe that after everything that he has said about pull your bootstraps up and get on with it, you bunch of, we'll say.
surprisingly, there is still a lot of indigenous people that don't believe that he's actually said it. And when you
I
show them the proof, they still deny that, oh, it was a long time ago. He's changed. People can change.
I agree with Zivi on this one. It's another form of us basically taking care of us or being in control of us. You see, you have to understand with politicians, when a piece of legislation is inherently going to be negative impact on a portion of people in society, they will package it in a nice, pretty package label.
Right.
I think the Save Act, the executive order, like Save the Save Act,
Right, just
SAVE. It's
Yeah.
pretty packaged, but it's eliminating women's right to vote, the trans people to vote, and the military. The Fair Elections Executive Order, like they're packaged in pretty little packages, so just to be able to sell it to the mass group of people that have limited cognitive ability to think critically, and it works. Like, I hear so
Eh,
many people that are defending this because this is good. It's saying it's good. Like, shit, man, learn to read between the
well,
lines. Like,
and not to back up what to go off what Calvin just said. It's the firm belief of you can take a turd and roll it in sprinkles or roll it in glitter, and at the end of the day, it's still a piece of turd. Like it's not going to make a difference.
yeah.
And the fact that my own cousin tells me, "Oh, you don't know what you're talking about. Polyev is, he's the greatest thing for us," and blah blah blah. And I'm like, you're indigenous and you're voting for this man. Congratulations. And she's like, what? I'm like, you just voted against your own rights. Not even just your community, your own rights to exist.
Yeah.
And it's so mind blowing. But again, I don't control who people vote, and I'm not going to. But if
If you
you
want,
vote,
I kind of understand where they're coming from. Um, they can't help but actually believe that this person is good for them because their ability to think critically is so declined that they're basically only able to absorb talking points. And this is part of the narcissistic cycle and Darvo, which is deny, attack, victimize, reoffend. And you can see that clearly in the conservative playbook. You have all of these people shoving cameras in people's faces, and when somebody shoots it away, oh my God, he attacked me! Arrest him! Like, get the out of here! Like,
Right.
this is the exact playbook. And so when you have that constantly, and you have constant gaslighting, this app that we're on is specifically designed to gaslight us. And so the level of cortisol increases in your body, the level of critical thinking goes down. And that's when narcissistic abuse starts to take place. And these people are narcissistically abused. Have you ever tried to figure out why a person stays in a relationship even if they're physically abused?
Yeah,
Because
I was wondering the same thing about myself.
it's because their brains cannot, they're accepting abuse, that you cease to become yourself, basically.
Yeah.
And so when you come out of those relationships, you grieve the person who you used to be, because you'll never be that same person again. And same thing with the United States. They're snapping out of it, and they can't believe that they put themselves in this mess. And this is exactly what's going on in Canada. The mass majority of us are narcissistically abused in the Darbo system. These people, I knew these people. These were good, decent people that were conservatives,
Hmm.
that were my friends. But now they're so hateful. And I can't understand. Well, I do understand why, and I don't hold that against them. I just hope to God that we don't have to shock them out of this narcissistic abuse. And that's why I said Mark Carney has to have a psychologist in his campaign team to win this election.
I think you're right. One of the things, as somebody, I've worked in domestic violence the majority of my career through a women's health lens, and sort of understanding and taking training and picking up patterns in people about, where what keeps them sort of held into that continual rotation of victimization, right? But the one thing I know about every single perpetrator is they usually have a story associated with victimization, but at some point they crossed the line. At some point they decided that they wanted that power that the perpetrator was inviting in on them. Then they make that active choice. And sometimes people need to stop and deconstruct and understand exactly at what point was that choice made by you. So if you become, say, the person who's domestic by offender, you need to explore and you need to analyze that. And so I believe that happened to me sort of in the more gentler of ways through my educational journey, but it has to happen for every single person in order for this to kind of remedy itself on any level.
I kind of agree, but at the same time disagree. We all, as human beings, want to belong, and so when we're abused, we want to belong and want to be accepted and validated. That's a human condition, and so when we're being abused by an abuser, we just simply we because we want to belong. We subject ourselves to this abuse, and it brainwashes us. And this is what's happening in society, because people are so uh, they want to belong to a group. They want to be successful. They're subconscious. It's not an active choice. It's subconsciously they're indoctrinating themselves, and that's where the abuse starts. Um, it all starts with trauma. And so when a narcissist, before they start to abuse you, they try to understand you and where you're, and see if you have any traumas so they can trigger them. So our traumas was the COVID-19 and the economic hard times that came after that.
Yeah.
That's where our triggers came from, where our cortisol level starts to go up. This app was specifically designed to propagate and promote gaslighting. See, have you ever thought for a second, there was no Canadian content creators. There was no me, there was no you, there was not everybody. But once the United States fell and Donald Trump came in, poof, no more content creators in the United States, not as important. All of a sudden, Canada blew up.
Yeah.
Basically, TikTok was done. It finished its job in the United States, and it's now here for us.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like,
Hear
I
you.
am, I am from the Métis Nation, and I understand the mixed breed, and I get that, right? It's the word when people say half breed, they understand. I understand what they mean, but it's nonetheless it's still dehumanizing because I'm still a person. I'm not half of a person. I'm this. I'm indigenous mixed with whatever my mom is, and it's so my dad is the indigenous side of me, and my mom is the white side of me, and I am white presenting. And people like me who are white presenting have it a slight bit easier than the people that are not white tea presenting. And I get that. And I understand that. And some of these conversations are hard for me to understand, but I stay in here to learn because learning I do better. Right? Learning from
Can,
you and Ziggy, I do so much better.
can I correct something?
Yes, you can.
Okay, it's not the fact that you have it a little easier, you have it a lot easier.
Okay.
As somebody who is fully white presenting, and I need this to be very clear. And I had a video on my profile talking about this very thing. There is a difference between the experience of our dark skinned relatives versus those who are light skinned and those who are completely white passing.
Right.
And what I mean by that is those who of us who are light skinned is the fact that those who are white know that we are not white. So they still come down on us hard, but not as hard as they do in comparison to those who of us who are dark skinned.
But
Whereas
you
Well,
have
somebody who's completely white presenting, they get to skate through unless they out themselves.
uh, you're 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 using language that could divide people. I'm not about that. Yes, people have a different levels between their color, skin, and tone, but their reality and their abuse and their way of life and how they experience this is no less valuable than somebody that has extremely dark skin and long hair. Everybody's reality is equally as important. And this is what I truly believe. And when we start using language like that, I really don't agree with it. I just have to put it out there. It bothers me. We are all treaty people, both uh, all the black people, white people, everybody on this land, First Nation people, we all are all treaty people. We all benefited from that. And if we start to use that divisive language, it's going to kill us. And I just have to put it out there. I don't agree with that.
I get what you're saying, but I'm talking from a sociological standpoint of
From a
when,
socialized standpoint, yes, yeah,
yes, from
you
a
could be right. Yeah.
sociological,
and
yes,
that's what I'm getting at is the fact that like there is privilege in having the ability to be completely white presenting, because having so it, white passing is wording from Black Americans, as far as I have been taught.
yeah,
And that means that you completely can move through the world and say that you're white and never be outed. Whereas somebody who is light skinned doesn't have that ability because our features give us off. And
right,
when I say features, I'm talking about the size of our nose, whether or not we have cheekbones, our eyelid shape. Like, I grew up in
yeah,
Alberta, so they quite literally dissect my face, like down to the nines about this. This is why
right.
I'm pointing this out.
Well,
Not because I'm trying to divide anybody, just so we're clear.
Yeah,
No,
early,
no,
no.
no, ZB, I totally
You
understand.
scared
It's
me for
good.
a second there, ZB. I was like, oh, ZB, what you do? I apologize. I didn't know you were talking about from a psychological standpoint.
think about this with what you said earlier with Stephen Harper's involvement in with Israel and face recognition software to be able to control people. This is what you just were talking about, ZB. This is what they'll be looking for in that software. So even if your
Yeah.
skin color is one way, there'll be all these other things that'll be able to, help them to identify you in this, well, I have this
See, like
and that.
Harry's saying that he's white passing. He's not white passing. I can tell by your nose that you are not white. Because of the fact that I grew up as a little kid and everybody told me I had a fat nose, and that meant that I was Native. Like,
Yeah, this is my
white
nose.
people in this, like, especially in Alberta, can peg us off. And especially when you
Mm-hmm.
go down to America, they can peg off when you are not fully white.
This is me,
Like, they
ZB.
know.
I don't know how to assess that. I'm not even. Yeah.
No,
It's just it comes. It's a skill that you start to pick up on
yeah,
when
it's
you are in racialized spaces like that, because of the fact that it means your survival,
right,
right? And that
which
is
I get.
knowing when to leave a situation, and when they start picking at your features like that. Because I've had full on arguments with people telling me that I'm from Asia because of
What?
my eyes, and I'm like, excuse me, like, and this is what I mean. It's features,
Yeah.
and we think of white as this like blanket light skinned thing, but it actually comes down to your features as well, and that's where the construct of race is very confusing, and very um overwhelming
I
unless you are studying it in full well of how you maneuver through the world.
see
That's
if I
where I
didn't.
think
I think
a
race.
lot of people don't understand the complexities of when you say that you are white passing, because it's actually like they know, like, you have to be able to pick off these features for yourself because
Right.
it's your survival.
And the thing is, ZB, if I didn't know you, I would think you were coming at me, and I would take that a whole different way. But I know what you're saying because the social construct is exactly that. I have had people ask me if I'm Lebanese. I have had people ask me if I'm Hispanic. I'm like, no, I'm indigenous, but I'm also white. Because they're like, no, you've got this glow to your skin. You look exotic. I'm sorry, as a white presenting indigenous person, that is not something people want to hear.
You should have taken a compliment. Yes, I'm exotic, baby. What you gonna do, Dilly Uncle?
But I'm not rude, though. It just gives me the ick when people say I'm exotic. I don't know why.
It means you're not white. That's what that means. They
That's
see you as a pet. Exotic is a code word. You are like, leave the room.
I disagree. Exotic can be hot. Okay, from a deadly
Okay,
But
I
that's a
I chill with
microaggression.
exotic people, but
perspective,
like,
exotic can be hot, man.
yeah. It can also.
exotic is beautiful. But I'm saying when it comes from a YT person, my intuition says run. They look at
Run,
me like I'm a pet.
exactly. They look at me
But
like
but
I'm
but
food. I am
but
not food.
not a lot. But not we ZB. You might be taking that from a perspective of always been abused by non-native people. A lot of us don't have that experiences. A lot of us grew up with racism, but after we've socialized with non-natives, we actually have a better understanding of some of their cultural norms and their curiosities. So sometimes questions are genuinely out of curiosity of people trying to understand. So when they use words such as exotic, it's just a softer way of trying to ask for clarification or explanations. And sometimes it's just a jerk move to get to you. But as a First Nation person, we have to grow a thick skin
Hmm.
and don't let any of them bother you because that's what they want to do. They want to trigger you, and we have to be better than them. We have to be better than allow somebody to manipulate us emotionally and mentally.
That's a.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Thank you, Calvin, for that. Because,
I
like,
You're
that's
appreciate
what
welcome.
that.
my actual trigger is. My PTSD trigger is racism.
Yeah.
Because all of my trauma is rooted in racism.
Violation warning.
Calvin left.
Goodness.
It's because he was
He
driving.
was driving. I was gonna say turn off your camera. He was driving. Yep.
So
Yeah.
how did that get reported? Did someone have to report you?
No, TikTok
No,
saw him
yeah.
driving.
Oh,
He
really?
was, yeah. If you're driving, you can't have your camera on.
Glad they didn't shut the whole live down. I just wanted to take the time to remind that I'm doing the fill-in here for Treaty 6 on Indigenous Matters on the Beaver Network, and remind people that we take gifts, and it really is to help hosts and the emotional support that goes into the work here. We have subscriptions, we have YouTube, we have Discord, and tapping is clapping, and sharing is caring. There's my little blurb for the show. ZB, I've been really enjoying the conversation. You too, Smarchy. Because I don't do the nighttime shows very often, I don't
Right.
know people as, it's a whole different crowd. And to get to know you in a different way too, Smarchy's been interesting here tonight. I appreciate that. Was a little, it's a vulnerable conversation to talk about shame, to talk about, you know, um, the fact that I was so racist for so long, and that I believe um, that racism is something that is going to have to be constantly deconstructed in my life, along
Yep.
with understanding where, one of my big aha moments in all of this bullshit with Israel and Palestine, and understanding, looking at where we sit as a country, that we are part of a colonial system that's worldwide, where we are willing to support an oppressor like Israel so that we don't have that war on our own turf. That
I'm
we're
gonna
willing to
say,
support, the geocide kind of stuff, so that we can maintain our safety here in Canada and not want to have to look at that issue. It's made me feel that,
you're gonna get the live flagged. You
again.
keep saying the actual word like is not real.
Oh,
That is gonna get the live flagged, and the watermelon country,
okay.
that word, those words in particular, will get the live flagged.
And I got to.
Oh, okay.
I'm not censoring you. I'm just telling you to give you a heads up.
It's TikTok censoring you, not us.
It's all good. It's all good. No, nobody's born with the information, right? So we got to learn these things along the way. And I hope I don't get anything shut down here tonight by misspoken. But when I would, being suddenly, it was one of those moments where I felt that flush of shame come over me again when I started understanding, our role as a Canadian, right? Our role as a Canadian in our country, and what it is up doing to uphold these oppressions around the world for our own safety, and that we are willing to send money and military and supports that way, so we don't have to visit that. We're a G7 country, right? 40 million people, and we're a G7 country out of billions. The amount of money that exists in our country, the amount of money that is here because of resources, because of what is rightfully should be in the indigenous control as well, right? So
I just,
But
it's
here's the thing with the watermelon country is the fact that they actually are on top of oil, right? That's why America went in there and built that dock or whatever it was on in the water, is the fact that they want to drill there. That's what they're going after, and that's, but there's also some yeah, religious prophecy that if they do this, they will bring the end of times.
I just want to ask ZB and Mrs. and the chat if they can answer this. How would you feel if the parliament was run by Indigenous-led people, Indigenous-led in the parliament? How would you feel about that?
comforted. I would feel trusted. I look at Wald Canoe and hope for the prime ministership for him one day. I see what the Indigenous people have done locally in our community, in our province. I seen where, back when I chose social work as a career, and now I've stepped aside from social work, especially child welfare, when you recognize the role that social
Yep.
played in that conversation and stuff. So I sort of lost track of my thought here. So remind me again, Smarshy.
Okay, the question is, how would you feel if parliament was Indigenous-led?
Wonderful. So I've never seen any negative examples outside of when someone who is white presenting like myself wants to rub a little dirt. So there was some internal battles going on a reserve, and that gets used in conversation all the time. But I have seen the matriarchy grow. Myrna Tiji here in Prince George is now very key in the First Nations, Indigenous people being able to have control over the child welfare system, right? And those big, I've only seen positives in watching women grow and the matriarchy kind of take its natural order. So and because of that, Wob's not a matriarch, obviously, but he supports it, right? He supports all of the indigenous governance systems, and I haven't seen any failures within the system itself. I've only seen failures of individual stories when the colonialistic system imposes values or imposes jurisdiction. Put it that way.
I gotta say, with that, it is, you have to be very careful to categorize us as something that would be good, because of the fact that we are not a monolith, and when you do stuff like that, that robs us of our humanity, because not all of us are good, outspoken people. For example, Wob Canoe, and this is not slander on Wob Canoe, by the way. This is talking about the fact that he has been taught from a very young age to be in leadership. He was raised that way, right? Whereas somebody who was not raised that way, who just happens to be Native, but doesn't live with our traditions, like this is what I'm getting at, is the fact that you have to be able to make sure you're not romanticizing the fact that we are all like Wob Canoe.
Right.
Somebody who grew up in tradition would have the Ogitchide traditions close to their heart. Ogitchide means, for those that don't know, it's the Anishinaabe word for a warrior, because of the fact that a warrior is somebody who gave everything to their community.
Right.
And when you don't have those values, you are not going to hold those traditions close to your heart. And
I have seen
the flip to matriarchal society is going to be a long, hard fought battle of where women are going to have to remove themselves from unworthy men. If we're going down the matriarchal patriarchal discussion for a minute, we need to be removing access to us from men who are not worthy to be in community with us. That does not
Right.
mean that I don't like men. I'm talking about the ones who harm us, whether that's emotionally, physically, financially, whatever. Right? Because men do benefit from the patriarchy.
Oh
I
Not
yeah,
all men,
absolutely.
but
driven
it
by
has to be done in a way.
I understand. I hear your message. I think I mean, I'm very driven by ideology in general. So when I talk about, like, I witnessed matriarchy in action, and it was very powerful. It was very motivating. It doesn't mean it's limited or stopping there. It's always got to morph. I was able to work in an indigenous healthcare center where many different indigenous groups came together to work together, and everybody had different practices, and to see that all meld together and to be respected by everybody, and to see how you just take the strengths from the group. I think the privilege that I had in that is, I know it doesn't exist very often anywhere. Like every Wednesday morning, we shut our facility down to have a meeting just to check in with staff. And we'd meet in the circle, and we'd start with, of course, the land acknowledgement and prayer. And we had people work, Indigenous people from Alberta, from all over the provinces, and they'd all bring their special knowledge, and we would learn language. Oh, what an experience it was. But I've seen what happens when it functions well, right?
Yeah, and ZB, I again asked
Personally.
that question just to get an idea of what people would think, because I think you are right. We are not a monolith. We are not all the same. Every nation has different cultures and different practices, and I just appreciate you. I have to step down because I'm not feeling the greatest right now, and I'm feeling really lightheaded. So with that being said, I appreciate you guys for having me up, and I love you all. And have a good night.
Take care of yourself, right? There's a lot of emotional stresses that are, you know, physiologically, all these stresses and the woes of the world, so to speak, all of this oppression that we live with at a low grade that sometimes we don't give conscious thought to, doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Doesn't mean it doesn't
Hi,
exist. Hey, stay
hi
dead.
guys. I had to go to my backup account. Yeah, the other one got banned for
I'm so
till tomorrow. It's okay though. I've noticed that all content creators, all of us that spread education and awareness, any excuse to get rid of us, even the videos that we share, I'm hearing content creators getting warnings and bans because of that.
yeah. I know myself. I was a content creator from when the pandemic started to last year, and I created content politically, like the way, I don't know, the way most people create content on here. But I went from like 12,000 views a day to being shadow banned. I'm lucky to get 100 views on any video. So because I only have so much time in my life for TikTok, I spend my time now TikToking with the Beaver Network. But it's everywhere. And when we put a video on Beaver Network, every single video, even the promo videos for like tonight's live, is held in review. They don't even know what's in it. The very second we post it, it's held in review. And on my Misses account, every single video now is held in review. And I've got,
Yes, same here. But if we were rage baiting like the conservatives or Mario, our algorithms would explode.
yes, yes. But Beaver Network was supposed to be a response to all of that hate that was just being, the verbal diarrhea out there. You couldn't get, and if you were a lefty and you found your left leaning person in that room, it was so hard to hear the messaging. So hard. So the Beaver politics, now morphed into the Beaver Network, was a way to give people a platform. We've held 20 to 30, I don't know how many people actually got in the room tonight, but most people will be here at least 3 minutes. And
Yeah,
over the course of the evening, it's going to be 1,000 people at 3 minutes, 3,000 minutes of education. You
yeah,
cannot, if you stop and you listen to any 3 minutes of any ZB and Calvin, that they cannot deny that they heard that information and they
yeah.
walk away with a piece of it. And that's what we get to have on this platform.
I have really high hopes for Canada. I think we are in large a more acceptant society than the United States. Just historically, Canada has always been much more happy-go-lucky than the United States. We are less. We don't have to demonstrate our aggressiveness and dominance to be Canadian. We are just proud Canadians just because we're Canadian. So we have a high probability of beating this IDU movement.
Yes, I believe so. One thing to really recognize about the IDU is that it promotes, it involves itself in elections, right? It's right there in one of its three main principled activities. Involves itself in that's election interference.
It
Election
is.
interference, and it's spearheaded by a Canadian. And then we have, with
Did
time.
you guys hear about the election worker who had to be removed because he was trying to I don't know if it was a he. I overheard this, so I wasn't paying attention to gender. But they had were trying to pressure people into voting for Pierre Poilievre, and it turns out like he's like a Conservative Party member.
Wow, no, I didn't hear that, but I knew people were screaming and complaining and crying about pencils.
I just want to read, Bowden Vine just said that JB announced that the early polls indicate Libs are ahead 45%, cons 33.
Liberals had 45% turnout.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow. How much did
Zero. and stuff.
Conservatives get the turnout.
Well, they got 30, what did it say? 33%. It just disgusts me that they even get 33%. It disgusts me that people, that the base exists at that level.
We have to realize too that a lot of conservatives are voting for liberals right this election too.
Yeah. Yeah, strategic voting is the first time in my life I ever really stopped and thought about it. But I've been left leaning all my life, so I've pretty much, well, I have lost every single federal election there is. People say, "Oh, you're gonna cry," but I don't cry. I just suck it up and move on, right? Because I'm never truly represented in terms of my ideological beliefs, and unfortunately, in this federal election, even the NDP are a challenge for me. So I looked at strategic voting for the very first time and I used JB's app. And in my riding, the conservatives are like 70% chance of winning. And so that leaves 30% to be divided between the Liberals, the NDP, and whatever PPC raises its ugly head around here. So strategically voting won't work in my riding. So I went ahead and just voted with my heart and stayed orange on the weekend, and stuck with my ideology and what I vote with from my heart. And I hope that instead of 70%, that drops to like 50% or 51%, right? And that our dissentant voice is still registered through our vote, even if I know it's not going to result in my party being elected or my party rep. No. All right, so here we are at 6:30. I can't believe how fast time has gone by. Is
It
there
does
anybody
go
else in
by
the
fast. Eh? That's
Yeah.
why I'm good at like being participant in a live, but I tried to host my own live. I freeze up. I don't know what to say, or I'm like, okay, I'm going now. Bye bye.
Well, you do just fine. Part of the Beaver Network is all about organic conversation anyway, and just trying to get people to be as real as possible, right? And I think more people, people listen more when it's a genuine conversation like this. ZB, are you still in studies? Are you currently where are you at in terms of?
Well, I took a year off, and I am looking at moving, so I'm gonna be like another year before I can go back to school, at least. I'm looking at going to school for my major in criminology. If I don't major in criminology, I'm gonna major in Indigenous Studies.
Wow. Well, those are us.
So, like, to clarify, I started school in criminal justice, which criminal justice covers psychology, sociology, and law, and then from there you can go into anthropology, and you are now mandated to take an Indigenous Studies course. But I find it easier to be in Indigenous Studies courses because, for those that don't know, our justice system is very racist, and even in classrooms, it's hard out there as one of the few Native students in class, because it's quite literally just piling up on us because we are the demographic that is always talked about.
Yes, and I know a little bit about that because I went to university and I was always like the expert First Nation person. What do you think First Nations like? It's hard. It is hard, but uh, we have like I said earlier before, I mastered the education system and got myself educated, and now I'm churning around and educating others. I'm using what I've learned. I'm using their system and taking advantage of their system to educate and change their system.
I know that my one professor, she wants me to take over her course and teach, but I don't know if I actually want to do that because my original goal I'd set out to do was to help my people. And after being in academia, my educated opinion is to return back to culture and tradition. And that is what is going to help our people because of how the psychology and the sociology all impacts us. When we return back to tradition, that will be our strongest point to go back to.
I
Well,
totally agree.
Because the colonial way isn't helping that, in my
No,
opinion.
I totally agree with you. I've said it a million times. If aliens were to come down to Earth and abduct the most highly advanced mental, like the minds of society, it would be First Nation people that they take, because having a linear thought, which is European thought process, it eventually ends. It eventually drops off. You eventually run out of resources. There's no future to it. Whereas First Nation thought is more circular. It goes around in a cycle. So it's always kept in balance, always kept in check. It can go on forever and ever and ever. So that thought process, we have to somehow try to transfer to the large consciousness of society.
the medicine wheel. That's what comes to mind with what you just said.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And that's here, I can turn on my camera. Give me a second. I will find my presentation for you.
So, speaking of, it's one of my friends. She teaches up at the university here. She's got degrees coming out her yin yang. Anyway, she has a master's in social work and environmental planning, and she's PhD'd, but she has a master's in art therapy, and more specifically in Indigenous art therapy. And she's going to come on Indigenous Matters and do a show with Treaty.
Oh, that's so cool. My MacBook doesn't want to work.
You got a lot of pages up there.
Yeah, my pages are always like that. Always and forever.
Your desktop's tidy.
I don't know about that.
Is there a way we can get like a trained psychologist that is specialized in the Darbo and narcissistic cycle? Because I tried to warn universities, because our universities are the first front line to any propaganda and the first defenders of our democracy and free thought. Is there a way we can get a specialist on here?
Well, I would guess that the guest, her name is Dr. Cy Transkin, that she'd be able to talk to you about these issues. And I'm going to be seeing her on Wednesday, actually, and I will mention Darvo and narcissism and see if there's a way that she can bring that conversation alive. That the night she joins us, which will be probably in the next week or two, once her classes, she's just finishing markup, and then she'll be able to join us. But I think that this conversation, oh man, I could look into my contacts. It's possible I could find somebody that specifically could hone in on this. My guess is she knows a lot about narcissism. I know that, because and the work she does is mostly with children through the school system.
Okay. Yeah, because I try, like, the universities are basically they're the agencies that the government will do. Like, I tried warning people, I tried warning police, I tried warning members of parliament that are actually in Ottawa now. Nobody listened. And look at the predicament we're in. We could have. I said all of this stuff maybe like 5, 6, 7 months ago. None of the politicians listened. They're running around frantically because they know what that's stake now. But hell, you could have avoided all of this if you just listened 5, 6 months ago. I tried going to universities and asking them to use their accreditation to study this and warn the government. They didn't.
Sai, my friend here that'll be doing this conversation, she teaches a course called Victims of Abuse, and it's all about picking up the patterns. It's all about picking up those patterns. And just a quick Google.
You got to get an actual working sociologist or a working psychiatrist who is in those schools to do that. Like my one professor, that's what he does. And he was actually, I mean, that's another job I could go to, actually, now that I'm on this topic. But he works on research of putting out actual ideas of how to stop things. So maybe go to a sociologist and see which one of those are actually working in research right now, would be another way to do that.
Okay, that's okay. We also we have a huge Indigenous program at our university. I wonder if we could find voices within that program as well. Yeah, great ideas.
So
Yes,
my
unfortunately,
presentation was lost, so I cannot share my presentation with you. But in it, I did talk about how, going back to the medicine wheel for a hot second, in our program, we had to like make up an imaginary character of how we help them and heal them. And it was very much that we work with the medicine wheel and the spiritual, mental quadrants and things like that. I needed to finish that thought. Sorry to
Okay,
cut off.
appreciate that.
oh, no, going back to the colonial system. Unfortunately, because of the colonial system, a lot of the patterns that we see aren't going to be taken seriously. Only those people that are part of the colonial system and on the education system, and only those who have actual certificates that say doctorate of psychology and narcissistic abuse are going to be listened to. Um, it is what it is. To get somebody that I tried. I even went to I emailed Dalhousie University here in Nova Scotia, St. Mary's, CBU, and they even have a department specifically dedicated for social media and misinformation on social media. And I emailed them, and I didn't hear a peep back.
Well, stepping outside of sometimes what you would normally think of as the science to get your question answered. Anthropology is another place to kind of get some of these.
Political science would be another one.
Political science would be another one. Not to go to a conservative entity. You might not get the answer you want. But it's now I'm probably going to do a bunch of reading on this conversation, right? And then once I know the conversation, might be able to reach back into my tickle trunk of professionals, because I'm not working anymore due to disabilities. So who's hot on the topic right now. But I'll try to dig for you, Clayton.
Uh, as far as I know, there is not a specific department or organization or university that is studying narcissistic abuse in the grand scale of after COVID, because it is such a relatively um, new occurrence like COVID. And this narcissistic cycle darvo of using social media and to spread misinformation, gaslighting, and abuse. It's new. It's like groundbreaking. I even talked to some reporters and asked them, do some investigative research in this. This is the story of the century. And
Don't think this is history repeating itself?
it is history
Actually,
repeating itself, too.
you know what you could do? Psychology students. Psychology students who are presenting for their doctorate have to present a research. They have to present a thesis.
Yeah.
Research is it's government funded. So if they're doing actual research and they're proposing these papers, that would be a good research point to go to talk to.
The other place,
It's psychology students.
so if you want to Google in a really concise way, is you just write your Darvo tactic and then write scholarly article. And it should take you to some journals where sociologists who do their thesis will publish, where researchers will publish within their field. So there's journals in psychology and sociology and history. Just type in scholarly article and it'll take you likely to those research studies.
I don't know if it's still like this, but back in the day when I was in university, scholarly review journals and articles were difficult to access because they were behind university firewalls. and they weren't available for the general public. Is it still like that?
I get lots for free. I do it all the time. And sometimes you can get a lot of information from a detailed abstract. But also, you get to, I've been exposed to a lot of research as well, which can be difficult. Research isn't that easy to read sometimes. But no, you will find those firewalls, absolutely. But there's lots out there in the Googles for free. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Mhm. So here we are at 20 to 7, and we have been holding our own here for an hour and 40 minutes. If anybody else wants to come up for the last few minutes of the show, you're welcome to join us. Or if we have some more burning thoughts, then let's throw them out there right now. Yeah. If not, we can just end the show a few minutes early. That's okay as
Here,
well.
I can share some of my presentations.
Okay, great.
Okay. So, like, this is what I'm talking about when it comes to politics, is how all of these things inherently go in a circle. So, I know that there it is. Sorry. I know that you guys know what I'm talking about, micro versus macro, but for the general population who doesn't, it's the close community that you have is the micro, and then the outer is the macro. Right. And they all feed into each other going in the circle, which is a part of our politics. And that's what's really important to understand when we're talking about how everything is shaped by politics and our views. So I'm gonna keep rehashing this, but everything is political.
The personal,
Please go vote.
I live by the feminist motto, the political is personal, and getting people to understand the circular, their piece, right? Those macro pieces dictate to our micro, and our micro dictates to our macro. And that you make a valid point there, but a lot of people don't understand, and there's a big disconnect. That disconnect serves the patriarchy, serves the
Yeah,
colonial system at work here, and it is hard at work. It's not gone. We are not. We are far. I mean, we've come a long way, but we're not. We're not. You know, we're not far removed because we're right in the thick of it.
yeah.
More.
I guess my final last message is we can't outcompete the bots that the Russians and the Americans employ. We can't outcompete all the algorithms that are being pushed by the Conservative Party, are being aided to the Conservative Party. But there are a lot more decent Canadian human beings in this country, and all of us have to step up and do content creation. Even if you don't want to show your voice, show pictures and show videos. I mean, step up and help save this country.
I gotta go back to Pierre Poilievre's rant about crime, because I really love my work in when I was talking about my anti-racist criminal justice presentation that I do have, and that is the fact that decolonization is crime prevention. When we move away from the Western thought of thinking, and we all know what I'm saying there, is the fact that we find ourselves in community, and that is going to be something that is crime prevention rather than fear mongering of what he's doing.
So I missed that because I was inviting small boy Marie up. Thank you for joining us. Sorry, ZB. I sort of, I have a hard time doing the two things at once. Appreciate if you want to say it again, just.
Decolonization is crime prevention.
Oh, yeah.
And when we move towards understanding that, that's going to remove the fear that comes with the social construct of crime.
I love that. All right.
Well,
That's my
I
work,
like
just so we're clear. That is my work.
I like that. Decolonization is crime prevention. It's a slogan. It could be a new slogan.
It's
All
a
right.
lot better than his fear-mongering slogans.
Exactly.
So welcome, small boy Marie. Welcome to the conversation. I'm eager to hear what you have to say.
Mm, Tatamskat na kakyo. I agree to all. Um, I guess for me, this listening to um, how we relate to each other as human beings, whether we're colonial, whether or indigenous, or by religious affiliation. Our humanity is what's suffering as a whole. We seem to try and give levels of being, uh, uh, whether it's to kind of put ourselves either at the top of the hierarchy, or to put ourselves, I'm a victim. I've suffered residential schools. Like, I hate that. I hate being called a residential school survivor, because it's a terrible label to have to live with the rest of my life, because now I'm considered damaged goods. I can't think for myself. I'm so indoctrinated into the colonial way of thinking that I'm no good to my own people. That's what residential school survival stigma affords uh, to good human beings that can actually help humanity out of this hellhole that has been created on our motherland. I at the top of my priorities is, one, to make sure that 7 generations and beyond know what a good human being is, whether they're of the colonial kind, or whether they're indigenous or not. That's how Creator initially made all of us as good human beings, to survive, to not to survive, to live and enjoy life together in harmony with our natural world, because that's the beauty of creation. And for us now, we've come to a point in our humanity where we dissect everything that we are, and then to improve upon creation, it's a futile process for me, because Creator created me just the way I am, and life has taught me a lot, but at the end of the day, it's my heart, it's my being, it's my ancestral way of being that tells me that it's okay to be me. It's okay to be, I don't. Upsamoisquale is my given name as a child, but I was asking a question: what's the difference between cognitive dissonance and narcissism? Those are um, psychological terms that kind of pick our brains. And then we've sold our brains to the AI. We've actually put our brains into an AI that's going to think for us. And we've become lazy thinkers. Lazy thinkers. And we expect AI to give us all these magic answers. The kids are going to rely on them when they do their papers in university, and who they're going to cite. Well, AI, what's the latest on Nova? You know,
Yeah.
we don't relate to each other as human beings. As how can we clean this mess that's been created for us? Not It's created for us. We have to tend to it in our time, because 7 generations and beyond, they may not we may not make it there, because of the way humanity is moving and destroying life itself. They're in such a rush to die. I mean, I look at Daniel Smith and her new speed train that she went on Japan, get from A to B in a flash, and
I
then for what?
I just a thought just came into my head when you just said that. Have you ever seen the movie Terminator?
Yeah.
How robots control society and stuff like that. Now think about this, and this is just an imaginary scenario. Imagine society with their critical thinking skills so depleted because of gaslighting and cortisol levels high in society. Then we start depending on AI to give us answers. Then AI can direct us and influence us on what to believe. That is actually a very real danger of AI. That she is banged on that one.
I agree. I did get some comfort the other day. China was balking back at the United States, and the United States saying, "Well, we won't trade with you." The big threats, the tariffs, and all that. And the Chinese diplomat said, "We existed for 5,000 years before your little country of 200 years here has come along, and we as a society survived all these all these histories, right? And I believe that for Indigenous people as well, that this is a blurb here, 150 years out of 10,000 years, right? Like we have to have hope that um, that the ship will right itself in the sense of the history that it brings to the table today. We just are going to have to make more space at the table for it, and I'm here to fight the battle for that. Right, I'm here because this is what the day-to-day grind is about. Right now, it's the election cycle. We're out there doing the day-to-day grind. In my career, it's about every system that I get in touch with that I got to do the grind to push back at, and we do that one-on-one piece majority of the time. But I took great comfort in that Chinese guy's reflection of the fact that the culture and the people have existed for years, and that this is just even if it's 150 years, as like in Canada here, it is a small time compared to the cultural experience itself.
Yes. Ladies, I have to go. I want to thank you, everyone, for having me up. And a small boy, Marie, I can't really see. I don't have my glasses on. That was a very powerful, um, what do you call it? Insight. That's actually very, AI is that dangerous that it can dictate where humanity goes after this. But leaving, I want to say that you don't want to be labeled as a survivor and stuff like that. I completely understand. You don't let anybody else's labels define who you are. You define who you are, and you alone. And I take great wisdom and power away from you as I leave.
Mm.
So much for your
Oh, you
support.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, so a small boy Marie, are you can I ask you how you know of of the Indigenous Matters show? Are you familiar with Treaty 6? Just because I'm new to the room here in
Oh,
terms of who you are.
I've been a guest on there once. I usually take the position that our treaties have no numbers. They don't have any colonial numbers in the spirit world. We have a relationship that's carried in the spirit world, and we're all bound in spirit. And there's no colonial number that can take that away. And there's no colonial legal terms that can change the terms of that treaty relationship. And there's a greater power out there that is helping our motherland deal with the desecration of her body. I mean, you see what's going on in the southeast of Turtle Island, all those tornadoes, hurricanes, ice storms. we don't need military. We don't need an army to fight our battle. We have our protectors, and those ones, though I have faith in those ones to take us through the current dilemma that we find ourselves in. You know, it's we're in such a sad state of affairs as human beings, and you know, I pray every day that, you know, our spirits will wake together and create a world that's worthy of living in. You know, we're so uh, indoctrinated into the comforts that capitalism has brought us. It's a physical comfort, but it's at the end of the day, we lose ourselves in it as human beings.
Can't push back on that. It's a true message, and I do find that I do think it will be at a higher spiritual level that people do find their way to muddle through all of this. Right? I sometimes you know it's not rocket science. Sometimes it's not about that. Sometimes it's just about returning to what already worked, to what already exists, and to go back and to learn some lessons all over again. Which is what I'm hearing here with some of the conversation from what you're putting out here. But I always know that this macro level is so scary, right? All these macro conversations, when I get through my day to day by connecting the one on one, by being able to take the step back from the macro conversation and exist in the micro world, that makes the world go around. And because of that, it helps me to calm my cortisol and my adrenaline and all of the fear impulses that are triggered in our current political climate. Right?
Yeah.
Do you know that being optimistic actually helps reduce your risk of mental diseases? I was going through my notes. I'm making sure to copy and paste my notes off of my Microsoft before I lose them forever. Sorry.
They sing, always look on the bright side of life, right? There's power in that. There's power in that. And even if you can't live it every day, all day long, you don't want to detach and live in la la land, but you have got to find a way to step aside from that oppressant to, you know, to be able to thrive a little bit. Go hug a tree, you know, connect with people who are connecting.
But I love being Delulu. Come on, Delulu is the best.
It has its moments for sure. Small boy Marie, thank you for coming up and joining the conversation, even if it's at the end of the line, so to speak. And ZB, fascinating, and thank you for your input tonight. I'm going to call it a wrap on Indigenous Matters this week, and next week, the Beaver Network is going to be doing a 24-hour live marathon that's going to start Sunday night and go all the way through to the election results are over on Monday night. So we're going to be busy beavers, to say the least, this week, coming up with all the shows and then getting ready for the marathon. So just want to plug out there. The next show coming on is tomorrow night's news hour with Frontline Feminists. And if you want a list of the 12 shows now airing every week, please go and see our pinned video on the Beaver Network page.
Awesome.
And so, thank you.
Hey.
Hadi. Bye-bye.